Well, thank you so much. I always appreciate being part of this great community, Hunter and Power to Fly. This is a very interesting topic, and I'm so glad to be here discussing this with Giuliana. We had a great previous conversation in the green room. You know, this is a very dynamic concept. We are talking about the umbrella that is constantly evolving and changing, right? There's tons of intersectionality in our communities that are diverse, but especially in our Latinidad, just how you can see me and Giuliana. You know, we're both proud Latinas through and through, but of some European descent, and we understand the responsibility, we understand the privilege, and also the leveraging of this privilege that we can do to facilitate betterment in our communities. So, Giuliana, why don't we, try to jump right to it? I definitely want you to introduce yourself in your own words. I'm going to introduce myself first. Virginia Buccioni. I'm a DEIB facilitator, a speaker with Power to Fly, as well as a consultant of both topics. You can, definitely see some more of my work on LinkedIn. And I would love for you, Juliana, to introduce yourself in your own words.
Well, thank you for inviting me, first of all. Nice to meet you, Hunter. Nice to meet you again, Virginia. I'm Giuliana. I am based in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I am actually, as you mentioned, a very mixed Latina. I am Italian, my mom's Colombian, and I live in Argentina. So that's how this intersectionality comes into place. But mostly also I am a mom. I am a single mom and proud of it as well. I studied engineering and then I moved into data science. And then I actually wanted to use that in towards how to help better technologies. So I did a human design experience specialization so that we could have more inclusive and accessible technology. That was like my goal. And to be able to know that and really work towards a better inclusive technology, I also did a specialization in human law and then intersectionality. So that's a little bit about myself.
Awesome. I love that. There's so much here to unpack and share with the world. So let's talk about our experiences. The way the conversation always goes, I love to ask questions, love to dig deeper, love to have these like candid moments, aha moments, education, community. So talk to me about your experience as a Latina in the tech industry. Talk to me about the challenges that you have faced at work and then what helped you move through them and just, those lessons learned and those things that you do, that you apply every day to improve, right? Those lessons learned.
So I think that one of the important things to mention here is not only that I am a Latina, but I am a woman. These two concepts are very different because already in the tech industry, the Hispanic community is around 8%.
Mm-hmm.
To add to that, I am a woman, which is like you're adding an extra baggage. And then I have an extra point to check, which I have a very rare disability. It's not visible, but I have a disability. So you start putting things together, and at the end of the day, it's really hard for you to get noticed when the first thing that here is asked is, well, who's going to take care of your child while you're working? That shouldn't be a question that if I'm there in an interview or I'm working, somebody's taking care of my child. So why is it the first thing that we get asked? And it's very rooted in this culture, the way that we women are supposed to stay home and take care of our children, and that there is nothing else for us to do, or that we don't have the help around that maybe with our male partners or just ourselves, that we're able to do that. So just the culture itself is hard. But then as we were talking, being Latina in the Latino world, it's difficult because this is where the umbrella comes in. There is not only one type of Latino. We're a diverse. As I said before, I am European, I am half Colombian and I live in Argentina. Argentina is a country which was mostly based out of immigration after war immigration. So it's European immigration. So when you're asking an Argentinian, how do they feel? Most of them, maybe they're gonna, if they have to check a box, they wouldn't find it because they look at themselves as white. You don't see, but yet we're not, because we're not considered white. So that itself makes a struggle for us to fit in on a box. There is no box for us. And that is something that when we're talking about Latinidad, we need to understand it's a rainbow. Like all of us, humanity is a rainbow. We need to understand that there is not one type of person. 80% of the world population is from a different race, yet the majority of the tech industry is white male.
Or we have, there's the APAC community, the white community. There is other communities that also are not being represented as much, right? Especially in management. There's so much there to be said. I mean, unfortunately, I feel that that's why we're like, that was the beginning of the movement of DEI, where we all had the, it was your standard, your ERGs or affinity groups, which was one community or other. And we are so much more than that, right? We were just talking about how, there is Latinas that look like us. And also we're trying to break the stereotype in our own community, right? We're trying to break the stereotype in the American tech industry. We're trying to also provide bridging, a bridge to like both these worlds to come together and educate those around us. So there's so much to be said there. And then you said something about, also like the disabled community, like the, neurodiverse community, better said. And, not every neurodiverse, issue or condition is visible. And so we also have to be mindful of those. We have to make sure that, we elevate that as an opportunity for growth. And we don't elevate that as an opportunity for like, to take 2 steps back. I think that, personally, we have had similar struggles. We talk about like South Americans, we have been told all our lives that we're, especially Chileans and Argentinians like ourselves, we've been told all our lives like to be, we're white, and then we come to this country and we're not, and then we don't belong there or here, and it becomes a hodgepodge. So this is something definitely that we could apply in tech, right? Like intersectionality, no cookie cutter, one size fits all. You gotta understand your audience, gotta understand that we have 3 or 4 or 5 identities, and we have to elevate them. We have to advocate for them. We have to educate leadership for them. We have to also make sure that we do this strong allyship, right? Where we create that buy-in and that education and that conversation. And this is why these talks are so important. But
and it's important, what you just mentioned, it's important not to educate, but whoever is leading this conversation needs to create trust that what they're saying is what they're doing as well. Technology today, I mean, we live in a world where now technology helps most of our daily life, but technology industry, however, is the less inclusive industry today. So how is it possible that we are creating technology, but we're not being true to the reality of our society today?
Well,
and that's the important thing. That's the important thing about allyship in the tech industry that I think it's what needs to be highlighted. You need to know that the user, when we talk about the user experience, it's not one user. It's not the white cisgender male. It's an array of users. And once you fix one problem, it's going to be a domino effect. One problem that you're fixing for one user, it's going to help a bunch of users more. And that's the beauty about technology. You need to be open about what you're putting out there, because you're putting it out there for the world, and the world is diverse.
Right. Always saying that a great diverse product has to mirror our workforce, because, we all know what happened with the beginning of like voice recognition and face ID. You have to have people there. And this talks about how like there's tons of people that are like in our communities that want to join tech, but they don't get past a certain point, right? Because they're non-traditional background, they should be elevated just as much as traditional backgrounds, because you know there's something that doesn't go through on the next step of the interview. And this is why I'm going to ask you this twofold question that is so important. With your intersectionality, what does the term diversity umbrella mean to you, and how do you define allyship?
So the diversity umbrella for me, it's especially for us that we're Latinos, it's important because, like I said, diversity is not just, normally when we're talking about diversity lately, we see a lot about gender, race, and maybe disability. But under those, there are a bunch of other things that you need to consider. You need to consider if the disability is visible or invisible. If the gender, what about the LGBTQ community? The race, I mean, there is not only the African Americans, the Latino, and then the Asians, because in between, you have people that are mixed and we don't find a box to check.
Right.
Then there is, I mean, when you start putting things together, you understand that 2 + 2 is not 4. Right. It's, for me, that's something really important to understand how I move. 2 + 2 is not 4. 2 + 2 is 4 if that's what you want to think. If you don't see, if you don't think that when we were, when the women were fighting for the equal rights, they were asking the women of color to wait for their turn because they were fighting one battle. But that battle was for one type of women. Today is more likely than a woman, a white woman, will get a job rather than a male of color. Those statistics are very important for us to understand, that if we don't start thinking about how to fix the problems from the root, which is not everyone is the same, and we need to think about inclusion as not, I mean, the umbrella has all of this together, and whoever is carrying that umbrella needs to take into consideration all of this matters. So that for me is the umbrella, and it's going to be continually evolving. It's going to change. It's going to be, I mean, today maybe we're more likely to see the transgender community, the queer community. A couple of years ago, that wasn't even public almost, or as there wasn't that awareness. But today, luckily, there is a space for that. And we need to consider that. We need to consider what we're putting out there, because 10% of the world's population is part of the LGBTQ community. And I mean, there is still some facial recognitions that are not aligned to that, or technologies that that are gender-based as well. So those are things that we need to put into consideration when we talk about that umbrella. And allyship is actually working towards what you have and what you can contribute to that other person that is not the same. So I'm a woman, I want to work with men as well, but I want to work not only with men, I want to work with different genders, different races, different religions. Religion is a big important thing that's overlooked completely, but that also changes the way we perceive our world. So we need to start working together, and that is allyship. Allyship is, like I said before, trust, knowing, recognizing the gaps that we're living right now, and then working with those marginalized. I'll put it in comments because it's being marginalized, but it's being very much an awareness for a long time. It's just that these different marginalized groups are not being taken into consideration.
Right, and I think that, like, you know, like something that we started using like in the like United States with the DIB movement is, underrepresented. Like, I think that, we're underrepresented. Like, if you look at, I don't know if you saw that meme with the Apple leadership and they like take their pride on being diverse. It's like, that's underrepresentation, and that's what we need to be. And I'm so glad that you're bringing that, because we are, I think that globally, right? Because we're no longer just like, the conversation is global now, right? With the COVID, everything is remote. We're seeing people like, hire teams that are near short in that time, especially. And we just did great things like, bisexual visibility that was elevated recently. And that was awesome that I saw much more of it in media. The president of Chile is openly bisexual. And that's amazing, because he's bringing the conversation into LATAM in those spaces and educating, and the pronoun usage, right? They and them, ellas, right? Like, being that type of conversation that we need to include with our community and intersectionality. You bridge
and
the
it's important. And sorry, and it's important. I think that in this, not only in this industry, but in this moment of where we're at, to see representation. It's important to see representation. It's like you just mentioned the president. I think that one of the most important things that we lacked and we're working for right now is that representation. We grew up with no, I didn't have a mentor to look after, when I was going into this industry. I was trying to, find my way. I want to be that role model, maybe that made other girls looked up to and see, there is a multiracial woman that's working in the tech industry, and maybe I can go into there too. We learn, I want to mention this because I think it's important. The whole problem about the Little Mermaid that we're going, like the new Little
yes.
Mermaid.
Oh.
So this is where we stand right now. The older generation were saying, how is it that the real mermaid wasn't Black? It doesn't exist. Well, you see the girls, they feel represented, and the girls were the happiest ones to see that. And that's the generational gap. We need to work towards a better future.
Yeah.
Because it's sad to say this, but the past, it's harder to change.
Oh yeah. And you know what's funny is that, like, what not, it's not funny, it's real. It's, we bridge and improve that movement by occupying space, by having these conversations, and by creating awareness. And you totally bridge to the next conversation, which is, I'm so glad we're in the same train here. This is definitely an ever evolving, moving target, as the conversation, this conversation is titled. How have concepts under the diversity umbrella evolved and changed over time, and how will they continue to change? Let's talk about the ever involvement, the improvement.
So, it's important, like I said before, there were a lot of maybe names that weren't open, and there wasn't a lot of awareness on, for example, the importance of working towards an inclusive technology. A couple of years ago, we started having the emojis with different colors, and that's a big jump. So it's not that there is an awareness, there was an awareness, but it wasn't talked about. I think that the more, as I said, the more representation that we have, the more representation we see, the more role models we see there, and the more we talk about, the more people are going to recognize the problem and start working towards fixing it. So, for example, now there are problems still in facial recognitions that you don't see, like they don't recognize people of color. So you start, once it's difficult for you to fix. They say that adding inclusion or accessibility towards technology is expensive or it's difficult. It's not if you start from zero with that. If you have to fix it, yes, it takes longer. But once you start accepting the fact that if you think as the user, not one user, but as like all of the spectrum of users that we have, like that we are, not that we all are different, so we need to start thinking about that. Everything's gonna be just easier, and also start listening to the diverse opinions that are out there for you to put a better service. Because if you don't, then you're just gonna stick up to whatever you had before, and then it's never just by adding accessibility, by adding diversity, by being more inclusive, the revenue, like business-wise, the revenue is gonna be better.
You know, what's funny is that you hit the nail, because I that's what I do, right? Like, so I come into companies, set the diversity and recruiting strategy. I'm a recruiter. And one of the biggest things that it's such a simple concept, but yet it blows the mind of the clients I have. And like, you know, so we're talking about any size of startup. Recently was a thing, it's go back to the basics. If you would have hired an intersectional diversity, fully and truly diverse, not just like, you know, identity, race, like we're talking about neurodiversity, all of the above, you would have never had this problem that you're having right now. You would have had, like you said, like the voice ID, like the voice and the face ID. You would have not been having all the issues that you're hiring me to come in, like untangle and undo. So that's why it's so important for people to tune into this conversation and to hire and to empower those voices in your company, so they can raise their hand when they see a problem starting, and they can start fixing it as they come, and not wait or intimidate your workforce, right? Like, there's things out there that they're notorious for doing this. It's don't silence the voices, right? Because if you have that person in the room that can fix the problem from the get-go, be comfortable raising their hand, be proactive to fix things because they're happy in what they do, you're going to have an ever evolving, ever moving and proper group that is going to create a movement, which is empowerment and true equity, right? What would we not, allies or people like us that are, you know, champions for our community, what would we not want more than not ever having to provide these talks? Because that's known, it's normal, it's standard, and that's what we do. So I'm so glad. And
it's important to listen. I mean, you need to listen. The allyship is about listening, it's about supporting, and it's about really showing that you care, but truly, like it doesn't have to be just for paper.
Performative.
The end result is gonna show. The end result is gonna show. And something that has happened to me throughout my career, I say, is that sometimes they think that a diverse culture means that they're creating diversity for like within the company, but they're always put it in the. It's funny to me say this, but sometimes I say, okay, so what is the percentage of the women that you have in your company? Well, there are a lot. Most women in the accountability or human resources are women, and I'm like, what about the technical team? Well, we're 5 people and there's 1 woman, and I'm like, maybe like it's not a diverse culture if the women are in
a non-tech and
in a non-tech part of the company. That's not being inclusive, that's not being diverse. And I think that is something that needs to really be highlighted, right? Because right now the biggest problem in the tech industry, I think, is that women are leaving because of the culture in where they are. And if the culture is not changed, then this is going to continue on and on. Right. It needs to change from, like, as you said, from the root. The culture needs to be real. The diversity culture needs to be all over, from what you're saying to your employees to what the product that you're putting out there.
And we're talking about cost. Let's talk about the effect. This is cost that we just talked. The effect is, so listening, then there is reacting and doing and improving, right? So we just talk across, this is the effect. The effect of just not hiring is retaining, holding space and community, elevating the voices, right? There's creating specific goals for growth and empowerment, right? Especially for those of the non-traditional communities or those of neurodiverse folks too. It's not just bringing the folks in hiring, it's empowerment, tailoring goals, mentorship. A ton of them want mentorship. And you're talking about that.
I am a proud mentor, and I tell you, it's incredible. Sometimes we don't realize that how much help you can leverage from mentoring, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't know, men and women, they're all, sometimes you would think that mentorship or these like circles might be only for women. Men are also looking for that safe space, but
Right.
they never, maybe because of society, they didn't feel as if they were welcome, or they were be like, they, it wasn't a space for it. This is
Mm-hmm.
like a problem that you can see all over. It's not just that, I mean, it's mostly gender based, but it's intersectionality based. You need to listen, you need to see what the problem is out there, you need to see what the culture is, you need to fix that culture, you need to, yes.
Awesome. No, and I think fixing the culture is great, and you hit the nail, and I love that. But this is a great question that we have to talk about to wrap it up. How Let's talk about lessons learned, because we talked so much about like just the movement and the knowledge and stuff. Let's bring it to the main point here. How can the tech world continually adapt to the evolution of concepts and goals under the diversity umbrella that we talked about, particularly the goals of allyship that we just talked about, and gender inclusion, which we also covered?
So one of the, as I mentioned, one of the important things right now is to recognize that there is an exclusion. Once you recognize that, it's easier to recognize the inequalities that we're working with, and help the culture to learn from diversity, and then solve one problem that maybe helps other problems. Like, I'm gonna give like a very small example of accessibility and inclusion, which is, um, sometimes when you create, for example, uh, you're fixing a problem for someone that might have a mobile disability. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe that person doesn't have a hand,
Mm-hmm.
but then you're working with that can help with somebody that maybe has a broken arm. It's not gonna be forever, but that person needs that help right now. And then
Yeah.
you're adding another tire there. Women who carry children and they can only use one hand.
Mm-hmm.
See?
That's why you learn the main thing and you apply it to different
And you
situations. And that's
apply.
throughout. Yep.
So if you learn from, like, if you recognize that there's a problem and you see what is out there, and you try to fix maybe one problem, you'll figure out that that problem might help an array of other users, an array of other problems that maybe wasn't there to think about before.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty about working in a tech industry, is that once you realize how you can apply those inclusion and diversity problems that you're looking at, then you can apply them for the whole rainbow.
Yes. I love how we brought it to this main point. Now we created the energy. Now we planted the seed in people's minds. Thank you, Giuliana. This has been so valuable. Thanks for holding community with me. And thanks everyone for
Thank
tuning
you.
in.
Thank you for inviting me. I love being part of this summit, and thank you. I hope to see you again.